Good morning, Napa Valley Unitarian Universalists, and happy Mother's Day. I'm Reverend Dr. Leisa Huyck, and I'm your parish minister. And with me this morning is Maggie Ingalls, and she will be our celebrant today. Each week, we gather to connect with each other and to pay attention to both the beauty and the brokenness of our shared life on earth. We gather to be part of something bigger than ourselves and to explore new relationships and new ways of being. All this month, we are asking ourselves the question, what does it mean to be a people of thresholds? Birth is the first and most important threshold that everyone here has crossed. Every single human being on this planet was born from the body of a woman. Becoming a parent is another important threshold in human life, although not everyone does it, or at least not in the same way. Giving birth is one way to become a parent, but certainly not the only way. On this Mother's Day, we will celebrate mothering and also witness to its challenges and pain. Come, let us bring our whole selves to this time together and let us worship. Now is the time for centering through music.
Every week, Unitarian Universalists around the world light a flaming chalice, the symbol of our faith. Today, may the flame symbolize the force of life which moves through us, generation after generation, giving rise to an unbroken stream of mothers and their offspring. May the chalice symbolize our covenanted community, which helps us nurture life in all its many forms. And may the circles symbolize our ever-widening circles of care and compassion. You are invited now to light your chalice or candle at home with these words from Billy Collins, a former poet laureate of the United States. The lanyard. The other day, I was ricocheting slowly off the blue walls of this room, moving as if underwater from typewriter to piano, from bookshelf to an envelope lying on the floor, when I found myself in the L section of the dictionary, where my eyes fell upon the word lanyard. No cookie nibbled by a French novelist could send one into the past more suddenly, a past where I sat at a workbench at a camp by a deep Adirondack lake, learning how to braid long, thin plastic strips into a lanyard, a gift from my mother. I had never seen anyone use a lanyard or wear one, if that's what you did with them, But that did not keep me from crossing strand over strand again and again until I had made a boxy red and white lanyard for my mother. She gave me life and milk from her breasts, and I gave her a lanyard. She nursed me in many a sick room, lifted spoons of medicine to my lips, laid cold face cloths on my forehead, and then led me out into the airy light and taught me to walk and swim. And I, in turn, presented her with a lanyard. Here are thousands of meals, she said, and here is clothing and good education. And here is your lanyard, I replied, which I made with a little help from a counselor. Here is a breathing body and a beating heart, strong legs, bones, and teeth, and 2 clear eyes to read the world, she whispered. And here, I said, is the lanyard I made at camp. And here I wish to say to her a smaller gift, not the worn truth that you can never repay your mother, but the rueful admission that when she took the 2-tone lanyard from my hand, I was as sure as a boy could be that this useless, worthless thing I wove out of boredom would be enough to make us even.
Now please join in singing hymn number 51, Lady of the Seasons Laughter.
I invite you now into a moment of receptivity and reflection as we share the joys and sorrows of this community. We make sacred the milestones of our lives when we share them with each other. We have here a bowl of water and some stones. If you would like to share your joy or sorrow with all here, you can type it into the chat. If you have a joy or sorrow, or even just a concern in your heart and do not need to share it with all here, type the word stone in the chat, and Reverend Leisa will place a stone in the bowl for you.
place one final stone in the bowl for those joys and sorrows that are too tender to share. I invite you now into a time of quiet reflection. Get comfortable in your seat. Pull your hands off your keyboard and hold them palms up in your lap. Place your feet on the floor and feel your connection to the earth, right through the floor to the living stone beneath. Feel how the earth supports you. Pull your shoulders up to your ears and then drop them. Shake all that out. Receive a breath in and then out. I am here. In and then out. You are there. In and then out. We are together. And now hear these words. Spirit of life, source of all love. Now is the time in spring when some days grow so warm that we get a hint of what lies ahead in summer. But then squalls of rain blow in and cool us off and lay the tall ripening grasses down on the hillsides. Spider silk floats in shimmering strands everywhere, catching the light in brilliant magenta and turquoise. Mama birds sit on their nests. At my house, a pair of oak titmice have built a nest on our porch right above the laundry room door next to the clothesline. We burst out of the door with clothes to hang and then noisily rush back in, but they will not be moved. Last year, they tried to build a nest on our porch, and we took their first few attempts down, thinking to protect them by requiring them to nest a bit farther away. But they just kept flying back and forth, carrying grass and twigs to a different location on the porch. Whatever we do, the birds just keep nesting. Despite all setbacks, they do the work that is theirs to do in response to the call of life. May we ever do likewise. Amen, and blessed be. Let us now enter into a time of silence. The piano will bring us out to sing hymn number 8, Mother Spirit, Father Spirit. Have you ever listened to cathedral music devoted to the Virgin Mary? You know the kind I'm talking about? Those ethereal chants and hymns that soar up into the very highest registers of the human voice. It is beautiful, isn't it? But how long can you listen to it? If I'm feeling crazed, I like to listen to it for a while to calm myself down. But pretty soon, I want to put on something with a rhythm and some bass, something gritty, maybe something sexy. I want to dance. I find that ethereal, blessed virgin music to be lovely, but a little too disembodied. That's on purpose, you know. That kind of music was originally written to raise people up out of their bodies and into the purely spiritual realm, as if there really were such a thing. The realm of the flesh was seen as sinful, and from about 400 of the Common Era on, the church associated women with that sinful realm. The only way it could allow people to praise the Divine Mother was to divorce her from her whole embodied self, particularly her sexuality. She could be a mother, but only if she was a virgin mother, and her personhood existed only in relationship to her son. She was a sexless being whose whole purpose was to give life to someone else. In paintings and sculptures, Mary is always shown as the nurturing mother, feeding the divine child from her breasts or holding him lovingly, smiling into his face as he reaches for a lock of her hair. This is the blissful part of motherhood that so many women dream of, but it's not quite all there is to it. Mary is never shown swelling purple with rage at an obstinate 2-year-old or involuntarily smacking him because he headbutted her in the mouth. She's never shown sobbing into her pillow after she's accidentally shut his little fingers in the door, or after he's grown up and yelled, "I hate you," and slammed the door in her face. You never see her crying with exhaustion after being up with the colicky baby all night, with a thought bubble above her head that has the words from this Rosalie Sorrell song. Today's the day we give babies away with half a pound of tea. Nor do you ever see Mary out dancing with her friends in a sexy red robe, or swooning with passion in Joseph's arms, or swimming naked in the Sea of Galilee, or working on an intricate design for a shawl for the market. No, Mary is completely focused on her child, and she is ever patient, ever kind, ever calm, ever loving. The most unhappy she ever looks is when she holds her dead man-child across her knees after his crucifixion. Even then, her grief is portrayed as pretty rather than wrenching. I mean, imagine your beautiful eldest son, a great teacher and prophet, murdered by the empire for teaching people to love one another, and you, a woman from a Mediterranean culture, are going to hold him across your knees and look like this? I don't think so. I think there would be screaming and stomping and weeping and tearing of hair and clothing. So, this image we have of the blissfully loving or decorously sad Divine Mother is just a little incomplete. But if we consider today's Mother's Day cards to be any indication of what American culture believes about femininity and motherhood, we are still holding this image up for ourselves as the ideal. How many people here dread trying to find a Mother's Day card for your mom, or did while she was still alive? Every year, I go to the store to find a card for my mother. This is always impossible because none of the cards say anything remotely applicable to our relationship, but I still try. So one time I was looking and looking when I noticed another woman standing near me. First, she picked up a card, then read it and shook her head and put it back. Then she picked up another and looked inside and snorted. She picked up a third and went, "Ha!" Then another and muttered, "Yeah, right." Finally, she slammed the card back into the rack and stalked off, every line of her body rigid with pain and frustration. And I knew then that I was not the only one. The mom whom the cards address is always there for her child, always available to listen and nurture and comfort. She stays up all hours of the day and night to care for the child in sickness and in health. She tends the child's emotional wounds and gently challenges the child to be the best person they can be. If the child is a girl, she teaches her the feminine arts of beauty and allurement, how to dress and shop, cook and clean, sew and decorate, attract a suitable husband. If the child is a boy, she civilizes him. She teaches him manners, helps him with homework, and gives him advice about finding a suitable wife. She makes it clear to children of either sex, because cards only come from son to mother or daughter to mother, that they are the most important thing in the world to her. She is completely fulfilled by spending every hour of her life at home caring for her family. Well, if that's the ideal, no wonder so many of us have trouble finding cards for our mothers. And no wonder so many of us mothers are afraid our kids won't even call today. Our mothers don't measure up, and neither do we. But that's because the mother pictured in the cards is not a real person, and she's not living in the real world. So let's give up the ideal for a minute. What's the real? There are many reals, as many as there are people. There are people in this sanctuary, or our virtual sanctuary, whose mothers did devote themselves entirely and happily to raising their children. But there are also those whose mothers were the main providers for their families and were hardly around. Some had mothers who hated them and abused them. Some people's mothers lived with mental illness or addiction. There are some people who have no mother at all. There are women who give birth with joy and ease. There are women who have adopted children with special needs. There are women who want desperately to be biological mothers but haven't been able to. There are women who gave up babies for adoption and are glad they did, and women who gave up babies and remain heartbroken decades later. There are women who love being mothers more than anything, and also women who find motherhood difficult beyond belief. There are gay male parents who are more nurturing and better at homemaking than most women. There are single parents, straight and gay, and transgendered and genderqueer parents who do mothering and fathering both. There are people who choose not to have children, but instead nurture life through teaching or other helping vocations. So the real is complex and certainly non binary. And when real people have to live in the real world, mothering gets downright hard. Consider my mother as an example. She had me when she was 19 and single. She married my adoptive father soon after and had my sister 2 years later. My mom is a brilliant, creative person, and she desperately needed contact with other adults, but she stayed home with us until I was 4. Then two things became clear to her. One was that she would go insane if she didn't do something with her mind. The other was that my adoptive father drank way too much, and she needed to make sure she had a way of supporting herself. So she went to college and we went to daycare, and that was fine. But then when I was 8, my mother went to medical school, and I hardly saw her again for the next 9 years. When she was home, she was exhausted and crabby. My life was lonely and hard, and as time went on, I had more and more responsibility at home for taking care of my alcoholic father and my sister and our house and our pets. But what were my mother's choices? She could stay at home full time and be dependent on an addict, or she could go to school and work full time and have a career that was fulfilling and that would support us if she left her marriage, which she eventually did. Part time school and work were just not options because medical institutions were then and still are now set up for men with wives at home. And there was no safety net for families struggling with addiction. As a child, I was proud of my mother and I was glad to help her succeed and do good work. She wasn't like the TV moms, but she provided for us. She taught me how to survive as a woman in a man's world. It was only when I married and had my own children that I learned the full impact of my mother's absence while I was growing up. Children and teenagers need nurturing and care. Somebody has to raise the children. That nurturing energy, which people of every culture have called the divine feminine, that energy is needed in our world. And every parent needs to have it, not just female parents, every parent. And not just parents, but everyone who lives on this planet. Everyone needs to know how to nurture life. No one is liberated if we have to give up our capacity to nurture in order to succeed. But that's just what my mother had to do. She was not there to nurture us, and it hurt us. I have never blamed my mother for this because it was not her fault that society is the way that it is. Her options were extremely limited. But I told myself that I was going to do better. I was going to find a way to balance my needs with the needs of my children. Ha! For a while, I did manage it. I did have the option to go to school part time while I was getting my PhD and stay home part time, so I did that. But once I had graduated and started looking for a job in academia, I learned that, like most professions, mine was one in which I'd have to work 60 to 70 hours a week in order to succeed. Another system originally set up for men with wives at home. And there was another complicating factor. Like all the women in my family going back at least 5 generations, I had married an alcoholic who lived with severe depression. So I found myself having to make the same damn choice that my mother had made. I could stay home and be dependent on my children's father, or I could leave him and do whatever it took to succeed in academia. I left him and threw myself into my job. It was necessary for our survival, but it was the worst time of my life. I lasted 3 years. Then I came to a point where I simply could not bear to be away from my kids so much. I loved them more than I had ever imagined a person could love. They were wonderful human beings in completely different ways. I wanted to spend time with them, to read with them, to dream with them. I wanted to take them to the beach and the forest and teach them about their world. Academic success was not worth the price of giving that time up. So I let all my professional dreams and ambitions go. I jumped off the tenure track and moved into part-time research. Economically, I could still support my family, barely, but I never rose to the status in my field that I had dreamed of. I still did some good work and accomplished some important things, but I was never the star my professors had expected me to be. I made the opposite choice of my mother's. I gave up success in order to nurture my family. But in the meantime, before I made that decision, my kids were miserable. First, I left their father and they were devastated. Then I put them in after school care 3 days a week, and that made them tired and sad. And as time went on, despite my best efforts, my son grew more and more distant from me. He went to live with his father full time when he was 14. We didn't reconcile until he was almost 30. Now, my story is a hard one, but it's the story of a woman with enormous privilege. With my education and skills, I had options that most women in this world can't even dream of. I've known so many women who had no education and no skills and no way to support their children if they left an abuser. For those women, staying with a partner who regularly hurt them was the best way they knew to take care of their children. So here's the hard reality of parenting in this society. We love our kids more than we can bear, and we do the best we can with what we have, and still we fail them in one way or another. In the system in which we live, hierarchy, if you remember from last week, we simply cannot meet everyone's needs. This is why we must have compassion, both for our parents and for ourselves. We are all perfectly imperfect. I used to long for my children to come to me and say, Mom, when you did X, it really hurt me. So I could say, I'm so sorry. I never ever wanted to hurt you. I hope someday you'll forgive me. And then I would tell them, here's why I did what I did. Don't repeat my mistakes. Do everything you can to heal so that you don't pass these same family problems on to your kids. They never did that, so I seized the initiative. I invited each adult kid separately to spend a weekend with me so I could tell them my life story and express my regrets for all the ways in which I had failed them. These were remarkably healing conversations, and this is how my son and I finally reconciled. I highly recommend doing this if you have any unfinished business with your kids. But you know what? Even if my kids and your kids heal all the wounds of their childhoods, and even if they break generational patterns of addiction and codependence, if they have kids, they will still live in a society that forces people to choose between nurturing their children and succeeding at work. They will still live in a society that dishonors mothering by making war. They will still live in a society that brutalizes the children of mothers with brown skin. They will still live in a society that every day violates the sanctity of our beautiful Mother Earth. And now they're living in a society that expects mothers to work and parent and teach their kids all at once in the same space at the same time. I mean, any of the three by itself is incredibly difficult, but to have to do all of them at once? And what about those parents who have to work outside the home and have no computers nor internet for their kids, who have to rely on the older kids to take care of the younger kids? I can't tell you how many articles I've read about the state of parents' mental health right now. It is not good. They are being asked to do things that are simply impossible. And yet, perhaps there is hope. As I've said several times these past few weeks, right now we are in a liminal space. We're at a threshold where we do not know what comes next. We have before us the perfect chance to change everything. And what if changing everything means instead of doing yet more when parents are already stressed beyond the breaking point, doing less or even nothing. What if parents and the rest of us go on strike? What if parents simply refuse to continue trying to do what is impossible and instead only do what they actually can? What if the rest of us support them by demanding a comprehensive safety net for all families? What if we demand changes in labor laws so workplaces have to allow job sharing and part-time work and family leave for all genders? What if we redefine success so that it means nurturing life in our families, in our communities, among nations, and in our world? Unitarian Universalists have always been people who made major social change. What's to stop us now? So let's take another look at Mother's Day. Let us no longer keep it as a day when we pay lip service to a mother who exists only on paper. Instead, let us take the day to speak honestly to each other about the real challenges of motherhood today. Let us honor parenting as the sacred work it is. This Mother's Day, let us all commit to truly nurturing life. May it be so. Amen.
Amen.
Blessed be.
Love is the spirit of this church and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. This congregation depends entirely upon the generosity of its members and friends. All that we give in time, talent, and treasure is what sustains this community and makes it not just a sanctuary for us to return to for spiritual nourishment, but an oasis from which we can go out into the world carrying the waters of life. You can donate by going to our website at nvuu.org and clicking on the donate button, or send a check to us at NVUU, 1625 Salvador Avenue, Napa, California, 94558. The offering will now be gratefully received.
Thank you for your many gifts. All you give and all you do is vitally important in building the beloved community here in the Napa region. I especially want to thank Maggie for being this morning's celebrant and Brian Shaw for not only his wonderful music, but also for producing this morning's service. Now, if you have any invitations into community pertaining to this congregation or any announcements, please share them on the chat. I invite you to join me now in a moment of prayerful reflection. Spirit of life, Mother and Father of us all, We try so hard. We try so hard to do what is right by our children, and we so often seem to get it wrong. And we want so much from our mothers, and they so often cannot meet our needs. May we be reconciled. May we look into one another's eyes and see you there, shining with love. May we imagine your arms around us, and may we hear you speak in the voices of the wind and the trees and the water, whispering, it's all right. Everything's gonna be all right. You are my own precious child, and I love you. Mother and Father of us all, we thank you for our lives. Amen. Blessed be. Now please join in singing our final hymn, number 91, Mother. We extinguish this chalice, but not the light of truth, the warmth of love, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we meet again. Now, people of this beloved community, every one of you is a precious child of this glorious and pain-filled universe. Together, let us bring a new world to birth. Go forth in love. Go shining. Blessed be.